Greetings, 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 greetings. I am King Clifford Jefferson, Senator God for the Fifth County Band Jew, son of folk ruler of Jerusalem, on the reincarnation of the peaceful, which we know as Jesus Christ. It is November 7th, 2025, which is equivalent to the Berber year 2975. I greet you in the name, pardon self. I greet you in the name of King Edward the Peaceful, which we know as the Vicar of Christ, or Jesus Christ. I greet you of all those who are trying to get understanding of what we are called to do as the children of God. Today, I decided to do part two of the unification of the tribe under their king. The time is now. When I get upset, I get amped up as a result of the condition of our people that are in, and it pushes me further to move forward towards our goal for liberating the people. We have brothers and sisters, family members out there that are homeless and suffering and, are not able to do for themselves, you know, a support system not put in place, as provided by the government, let alone the government, i.e. the whether or the family, and I am my brother's keeper, I'm my sister's keeper, I'm my family's keeper. Sometimes things are out of our control as a result of our condition. And this is 99.9% of the problem that we are having. And it's my obligation to try to correct this so that in the present and in the future, we as a people will not have to suffer from these circumstances. With that, part two, unification of the tribes under their king. The time is now. This is going to be transition from part one to part two, pretty much going over what I did in part one. So if you watch part one, we'll have a good time with part two. Okay, so without further doubt, without further ado, let's get started with this marvelous lecture. As always, uh, I have a video I'm going to show. It's a continuation of the MS Scroll 1066, but it's going to be a better breakdown of it in regards to us, the Plantagenet Crown, descendants of Edward the Fourth. All right, we are the descendants of them. Okay, and it's very important that you understand the purpose and intent of why this MS scroll was created at the time of Edward the Fourth, because everything uh, leading up to his tenure is what we call legal memory. Prior to that, his great grandfather Edward the First descended Richard the First, okay, which was his grandfather. All right, Richard the First was the son of John. John was the son of Henry the Second. Henry the Second was the son of Godfrey the Fifth Kind Man Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. But all this is very important to understand our place in the story under our own timeline via our own calendar. And we have a MS scroll, which is an illuminated manuscript, going back to our ancient fathers and mothers, going back to the BC era. Okay, in regards to our ancestry, known as what we call the ancient Berbers, misnomer as different names, which we'll go over again today. But nonetheless, we are in fact those living relatives. So we're going to start from those who think they know and prove that they don't know because now we know. Okay. So part two, unification of the tribe under their king. The time is now. So you claim to be a leader, a ruler, or emperor, etc. in regards to bringing your people to this state of what they seek for, which is prosperity. Then the time is now. Let's get started. Start from the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. We choose the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica because this is the oldest English encyclopedia. The oldest English encyclopedia. It was created in the 18th century. This is the amended copy, the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. Okay, if you watch part one of this lesson, you'll be able to know that. But if you didn't, please go back and watch it. But for the sake of today's lesson, unification of the tribe under their kings, the time is now. Just want to go give a prehistory of who we are as Berbers, identified as Anglo, all right, and with our those who immigrate to what we call Britain, which were called Saxons, okay, Germanic people, very important, you know, and as a result of us, the amalgamation, we came up on one unification, and even though the Germanic people, known as the barbarians, which is the North Europeans, Caucasians for that matter, there were people of darker hue in Germany, okay, going back to the original people of Germany who were Arctic descendants of those ancient Britons or Britannians, okay, which we'll prove today. All right. Berber is the name under which include various branches of indigenous Libyans, which is another misnomer, race in North Africa. We call ourselves Berbers, okay? Since the dawn of history, the Berbers have occupied tracts between the Mediterranean, the Sahara, from Egypt to the Atlantic. The origin of the name is doubtful, so this is the reason why we choose the name Berbers, okay? We don't usually choose the word Babar because that's the Arabic word for the English word Berber. The Greek word or Roman Greek word for the word Berber is barbarous, all right? Very, very important. But nonetheless, we descend from what? The Stone Age. We precede the Iron Age. We precede the Bronze Age, and every age that succeeded after that. So the Berbers have always been around. We don't go by the name of Mizraim, pardon yourself, the Amazigh, because those are nomadic Arabs identifying with the Berber history, okay? But they are not, in fact, Berbers. They are Arabs. Okay, so they would be considered barbers or barbarians. All right, very important. Some believe it to be derived from the word barbarians, employed first by the Greeks and later by the Romans, though the Romans and the Greeks called the Berbers barbarians. Other attributes first used the term to the Arabs conquerors. Okay, however, there may be a tribal name for Barabara or Barabarata. Okay, however you pronounce that. Okay, very important to understand that we are not those terms in which they identify us, because he who writes your books sets your timeline. There are different timelines running at the same time, creating different realities at the same time. Okay, our Buddhist monk's reality is not the reality for Chinese. A Chinese reality is not the reality for a Russian. Our Russian reality is not the identity or the history of those denoted with Scandinavian. Okay, everybody got their own culture, custom, traditions, etc. All right, so you have to choose which one you are associated with. We are in fact associated with the Berbers because the Berbers were the indigenous people and have them what they call Britain. Okay, they are identified by different names. And the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, which is the oldest English encyclopedia and which we use, was created in Edinburgh. In Edinburgh was the territory over in Scotland that was inhabited by the ancient Britons. Okay, they know as Abaracus. Abaracus, the father of British greenship. Okay, this goes back to 10,000 BC. 10, 10,000 BC. Okay, very important. We're going to go through it. All right. And you make your own conclusion about who know what they're talking about. The megalithic monuments of Iberia and Celtic Europe have their counterparts in Northern Africa. It's suggested that these were all erected by the same race by whatever name they be known: Berbers and Libyans in Africa, Iberians in Spain, Celts in Gaul, and Picts in France and Britain. Okay? So very important that the ancient Britons or the ancient Iberians or the ancient Africans are the same people. They are, in fact, Berbers. Okay? Berbers. We know it because of the body of politics that was functioning at that particular time. Okay? This didn't need to be written down, nor was it a written custom. It was something that they practiced. It was called folk right. All right, let's just go down a little further. In spite of a history of foreign conquest, foreigner, barbarian means foreigner. Okay? In spite of the history of foreign conquest, Phoenician, Greeks, Romans, Vandals, Arabs, and French, the Berber physical type and the Berber temperament and nationality have persisted since the Stone Age. Once again, you can go to any reference that you want to. We choose the English Encyclopedia Britannica because the English Encyclopedia Britannica was created in Edinburgh, Scotland, at the Scottish, what we call diaspora, as a result of the Scottish Enlightenment of the history that they learned about those people that were inhabited that area at that particular time, as well as global or continental. Okay, the Berbers were everywhere. They're the ones who ruled the world. That's the reason why you see the kings holding up the crucible globus. That's a globe of the world. Okay, very, very, very important. So we inhabited our nationality, our characteristics since the Stone Age. All right, despite our practices that were evolved as a result of mixing in with other cultures, okay? Whether by force or whether it was by uh, 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 allowance, nonetheless, it distorts the original, okay? Very important. All that is not, the fact has been emphasized by Dr. R.T. Latham, who writes, all that is not Arabic in the Kingdom of Morocco, all that is not Arabic in French province of Algeria, and all that is not Arabic in Tunis, Tripoli, and Fezan is Berber. The explained lies in a profound distinction of characteristics. The Arab is a herdsman, a nomad. The Berber is an agriculturist and a talisman. The Arab has built his social structure on the Quran, who can inculcate absolutism, aristocracy, and theocracy. The Berber, despite his nominal Mohammedanism, is a democratic, which is Jimna or Wittima, or as Kanun, the unwritten code of Magna Carta of the individual liberties as opposed to the community's goods. Now, it's very important to understand why they're referencing Arabs, because when you get into Arabs, you have to get into the time era of Muhammad, okay, which is, what was it, the 6th century, okay? And when you look at the history of Muhammad, he was one of the Rashidun Khalifa. When you're dealing with the history of the Rashidun Khalifa, you get the history of the conquest that these Arabs did. Now I'm called Moors, but the conquest of the Arabs did was the conquest of the Holy Lands. Whether you call them the land of Canaan, whether you call it the kingdom of Judah, whether you call it the kingdom of Israel, these were the holy lands of the sons of Abraham, going all the way back to Adam and Eve. This is the purpose and intent of why the reconquest were initiated in regards to reconquer the land from the invaders. We had the conquest of Levant, we had the conquest of Jerusalem, which is concerns crusade. We had the conquest of the Maghreb, we had the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, and we had the conquest of Britain. Okay, all these terms are important, but for the sake of the argument, we are identified as Berbers, not Celts, okay? Not Gauls, not Picts, okay? We are Berbers. So when you read the stories of the narrators who narrate a story about us, they're going to identify us by the name they want to choose and not the name that was used by those people. Just like we didn't create maps. When they create a map to re-identify and reclassify what it is that they're showing. You know what I'm saying? This was done by conquest, discovery, invention. I mean, what you call adventures, etc. All right. It's very important to understand that we didn't make maps for ourselves because we were the controllers of the land. And when we own the land or when you were in possession of the land, there's no need to make a map because you are in possession of it. Okay. The only reason why you would make a map is if you were going on a conquest or the crusade on a venture, okay, in regards to some other territory or geographical location that you were not originally from. Okay. I hope this makes sense to everybody. In lieu of this continuous breakdown, I'm trying to reveal to you about the truth. All right. But we know that the government of the Berber was written mod right here, and the law they covered was the Magna Carta. Okay. Once again, the history of the government of Wittenmont, right here, write that down, or Witten, and the Magna Carta, and that don't come until the 13th century under the Plantagenet King John. Okay, Wittemont originated under the kings of Wessex. Okay, the kings of Wessex was a unification of the Heptarchy. Okay, let me pull that up real quick. This is when the kingdom of barbarians were unified by Alfred the Great. The kingdom of Berbers, not barbarians. We were not barbarians, we were Berbers. But the story is not being told by us, so of course they identify us with foreigners. And we are not the foreigners. We are the indigenous people of all the lands. You are, or we are the people of the book. We are the fulfillment of a prophecy that was written down in legal memory, not immemorial memory, but legal memory. Very, very, very important for you to understand that, right? So we just read the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, that says that the government of the Berber was called Witten and that the uncoded law was called the Magna Carta. Just look up Witten real quick. Witten. The Witan or Wiseman was the King's Council and Anglo-Saxon government of England from before the 7th century until the 11th century. It comprised important noblemen, including aldermen, thanes, and bishops. Meaning of the Witan were sometimes called Wittenma, the same thing you read in what? The 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. Here you have an image of Witten going back to what we call the biblical days. The Old English Hexateuch is considered the 5 books of the 6 books of your Bible, okay? Written by Alfred of Isham, okay? Based upon our story, all right? Not what the Bible says, but based upon those who illustrated through what we call illuminated manuscripts, all right? That told the story of our existence, okay? Anglo-Saxon kings with his written biblical scene. You hear that? So the written scene or the Berber scene, since the government of the Wittens were that of the Berber, had the biblical scene, is illustrated in the Old English Hexateuch. In the 11th century, portraying pharaohs in the court system after passing judgment on his chief baker and chief cupbearer. Okay? Its primary function was to advise the king on legislation, judicial cases, land transfers, and other matters of national importance. The Witan may have elected new kings from among members of the ruling dynasty. After the Norman conquest in 1066, these roles were performed by similar councils now called the Curia Regis. Hence the MS Scroll 1066. Okay? The MS Scroll 1066. The Anglos were those of Witan, and the Saxons government was called that of a thing. Okay, a thing. Thing assembly. A thing, also known as Folkmoot, Assembly, Tribal Council, and by other names, was a governing assembly in early Germanic societies made up of free people of community presided over by lawmakers. Now, when we look at Germanic people, we have to understand that the history of Germanic people and the history of people who were there before the modern day Germanic people migrated there, we were already there because when we talk about timelines, the original Germanic people of Germany were the Berbers. Okay, they were the Berbers. We're gonna prove this because we get into the history of Abaracus and Brutus Greenshield. His descendants goes over to Germany, and this is what we call 11,000 BC. Okay, very important for you to understand that, and we know this because of the Encyclopedia Britannica and what we called the Encyclopedia Britannica, which now is the Encyclopedia Americana. Okay, and this was created in Edinburgh, Scotland. Okay, and Edinburgh, Scotland has a castle called Edinburgh Castle, and Edinburgh Castle was known to be built by Abaracus. Okay, Abaracus. It was chartered by King David. King David was a king of Scotland, or a king of Scotland. Before that, it was called Alba, and that goes back to Abaracus, which was a Berber. Okay, which I'll show you in a second. So King David, who followed with Malcolm III, Scottish kings, okay, Scottish kings, they're married into the kings of Wessex through Margaret of Wessex, who was called Margaret of Scotland, okay, who was the daughter of Edward the Elder, okay. She was the queen of Wessex, okay. Very important, who was unified by Alfred the Great through the kingdom of the barbarians, which was unified in 889 as a result of Charlemagne. And Charlemagne was a Roman emperor. Okay, we talked about that yesterday. I don't have time to go. I'll probably to go through it again today, if time permits. Okay. So written and thing are the government structure or body policies under the corporate personhood with the corporate powers of either the Saxon government or the Anglo government. And Anglo goes to the Anglosphere. So when you say the Anglo government, that was called written. We see written in the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica in Scotland. It didn't say thing, it said written. Okay? And written denotes to the Berbers because you didn't get an English reading out here until 1066 with William the Conqueror. Okay? Matter of fact, let me just pull that up just to qualify it. Then 65 AD. Have more competent people on my level, better for us, who are getting this work done and solve the problems of humanity, homelessness, what we call hungriness, people being hungry. Be able to solve this problem quicker. I'm just by myself. 1065 AD, Annos Dominios, in the year of our Lord. Okay? All this is going on in Europe. We got on the Iberian Peninsula. Okay? This is Western Europe. Okay? Spain, Alfonso VI, Portugal, all that, Sancho II, all that had to do with the Kingdom of Castile. Okay? And 1065. And the Kingdom of Castile was married into with the kings of England at this time. England. Westminster Abbey is consecrated by King Edward the Confessor, the last kings of Wessex, okay, who is supposed to be called English kings or Anglo kings, mixed with Saxon, because we know when we talk about Saxons, you get into the Dutch, okay, Netherlands, all right, Danish, okay, the Vikings who invaded Northumbria, Harold Godwinson, Tosig Godwinson, okay, these were Danish kings, okay, Danish kings who all fell subject to the English rule. Okay, the English rule. But where is the English calendar? You got the Berber calendar, but there's no English calendar. And we do what we call an English reading our year. So these people who are ruling in Britain, in England, and in Europe at this time are not English. Okay? Very, very, very important for you to understand that. All right? Choose a calendar. If you claim to come from a king, in this time, the unification with your leader is now. Okay? Everybody up here got their leader. Julius Caesar got his, and to him it's the year 1065. Koreans got theirs. Every nation in the world has a calendar to support their existence. We have the Berber calendar, and at that time, 2015. It's 2015 to us. When it's 1065, according to the Gregorian calendar, it's 2015 for us. 2025 is for the Gregorian calendar this year. To us, it's 2975. Okay? So it's very important that in 1065, you don't have an English reading out year. You don't get that till 1066, which is right here. And it starts with who? William the Conqueror. This is why you have the MS scroll 1066. English reading out year. William the Conqueror or William the Bastard. Okay? Very, very important. So we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We are the English Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Okay? That's who we are because we encompasses all that history. Okay? Very important. And why is this important? All this goes reference back to what we call the Encyclopedia Britannica in Edinburgh, Scotland. That encyclopedia, you got the Encyclopedia Britannica. So pick your choice. You got the Encyclopedia Britannica. Then you got the Encyclopedia Britannica, Encyclopedia Americana. Okay, so you got the Encyclopedia Britannica and then the Encyclopedia Americana. Okay, the Encyclopedia Britannica Britannica was the preceder to the Encyclopedia Americana. That came after, okay, and that was in Edinburgh, Scotland. So Edinburgh is very important to reiterate in lieu of this lesson. Edinburgh, okay. Edinburgh was chartered by David I of Scotland, married to Margaret of Wessex, Queen of England, or Queen of Wessex, because all the kings were unified by Alfred the Great, known as the Heptarchy. Okay, very important. But the descendants of Alfred the Great were the descendants who were living in Edinburgh based upon the history. Okay, let's just look at it real quick. When the Romans arrived in Lothian at the end of the first century AD, they found a Britannic Celtic tribe whose name they recorded as the Votandini. The Votandini transitioned into the Godoblin kingdom in early medieval ages with Edine. This is Edine, which is called Edinburgh, okay, serving as one of the kingdom districts. During the period, the Castle Rock site, though to have been the stronghold of Edine, emerged as the kingdom's major center. Did you hear that? Very, very important. All right. So these are identified according to the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica as Celtics, but in fact, we know that they are Berbers. Okay. It also said it was chartered by King David I. Okay. It was chartered by King David I. In 638, the Godin stronghold was besieged by forces of loyal to King Oswald of Northumbria. This is one of the barbarian kingdoms, which we would call Berber kingdom, because they were not barbarians. Okay, barbarian is an Arabic word or Greek or Roman word for barbarians, when they were in fact barbarians to what we call the barbarian, or what we call the barbarian conspiracy, or the what was it called? uh, the Great Conspiracy, or the Barbarian Conspiracy, or the Barbarian Migration, or the Migration Period. We're gonna talk about that again. We talked about that yesterday. We're gonna talk about it again today. So King Arthur of Northumbria is one of the ancient kings that all fell subject to King Edgar, the people we call Jesus Christ. It also says that the royal borough was founded by King David I in the early 12th century on the land belonging to the crown, though the date of the charter is unknown. We know King David was married to Margaret of Wessex, and Margaret of Wessex was one of the kings of Wessex. Okay, so she is of the royal family. Okay, let's go to the castle though. All right, let's go to the castle. Castle Rock. Not Castle, Edinburgh Castle. Castle Rock in Edinburgh. It is a volcanic plug in the middle of Edinburgh upon Edinburgh Castle, in which Edinburgh Castle sits. Okay? Very important to understand that Castle Rock is where Edinburgh Castle sits. Okay? Very, very, very important. Go to the history. Um, Edinburgh Castle. That's what I want to know. Edinburgh Castle is a historic castle in Edinburgh, Scotland. It stands on a castle rock, okay, which has been occupied by humans since at least the Iron Age. So that means you go into the Celtics, okay? There has been a royal castle on the rock since the reign of Malcolm the Third, the father of King David, okay? Malcolm the Third was the king of England, okay? Parts of Malcolm the Third was the king. Let me just look at it, make sure. Yeah, Malcolm the Third of Scotland, whose wife was Margaret of Wessex, as I said. Okay, very important to know your history. All right. So Edinburgh Castle, there has been royal castle on the rock since the reign of Malcolm the Third, King David's father. Okay, and they're not the indigenous people of that land. Okay, the ancient Britons are. All right, how we know it? Let's go here. The ancient Berbers. We are the owners of that land. History. Now it says here, there is no record of a Roman invasion. What was that at? There's no record of any Roman interest in the location during the general agricultural invasion in northern Britain near the end of the first century AD. Okay, 1 AD, 1 BC to 1 AD. Okay, and that time 1 BC in the Gregorian year is 950 AD, BC, AD, and in our year. 1 AD is 951 AD in our year. So we are already in Annos Dominios under the Berber calendar. Okay, because AD means in the year of our Lord. And that's the same time when Jesus was born. Okay. Matter of fact, let's just pull it up. I ain't got time. We can go through it another time. It says this. It says uh, a Ptolemy map of the second century AD shows a settlement in the territory of Baltini named Alona, meaning rock place, making this possibly the earliest known name for the castle rock. This can, however, refer to another of the tribe's hill forts in the area, the Uncanal Chronic of Andrew of Winton, 1350 to 1423. An earlier source for Scottish history names Abaracus, a legendary king of Britain, as having built Edinburgh. Did you hear this? Abaracus, a legendary king of building Britain. Now, who was Abaracus? Who is Abaracus? This is one of the ancient Britons. Okay, he was in fact a Berber who lived 10,000 1006 to 967 BC. This is before Rome invasion. Okay, this is before Rome. This is before Rome was created. Rome goes back to 735 BC. Okay, under Romulus and Remus. Okay, 753 BC. Romulus and Remus. Okay, we're in 967 BC, 10,006 to 967 BC, which means Berber counter. Okay, and Abaracus is the one living in Edinburgh as one of the ancient Britons in BC. Okay, very, 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 very important. All right, his son was Brutus Greenshell, right here. This is after the Trojan War. Okay, when you get into the Trojan War, you get into Brutus of Troy and his sons. Okay, which are all on the MS scroll 1066. Okay, Brutus of Greenshell. Brutus Greenshell was a legendary king of Britain and accounted by Godfrey Amamus. He was the son of King Abaracus and came to power in 101 BC. Look at those faces, brothers and sisters. Kings of Britain. His son, Lil. Okay? All of this is on the MS scroll. Okay? We were the ancient Britons. They were, in fact, Berbers. Okay? Because the Celtics come from the Iron Age. The Berbers come from the Stone Age. Okay? And we know that Edinburgh Castle was a castle on what? Everybody said stone. Okay? So let's watch these people qualify our story. We're going to play this, and I'm going to stop and go back to the references that apparently they aren't clear on. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to break down this scroll and reference to who are the people they're talking about. Okay? And then it's going to stop with the War of the Roses under Edward III, the last known genealogical descendant who descended down from those people identified as Adam and Eve. Okay? Like and subscribe, brothers and sisters, as well as donate free and common sockets, the $ Clifford Jefferson L, or the Third Temple English Church of England, which in fact we are the building of the Third Temple. Okay? The Third Temple has been resurrected. Okay. They said Edward the Fourth. Uh, this was created to substantiate Edward the Fourth right to be king of England, which goes back to the kings of Britain, because the kings of Britain are the kings of England. They're one and the same. The names have changed. Okay, and this goes all the way back to chroniclers who are associated with the Benedictine monastery, which was created as a result of the conversion of Anglo-Saxons to Christianity under what we call the conversion under Pope Gregory the First, under Augustine of Canterbury. I mean, Pope Gregory the First, and what's his name? Augustine of Canterbury, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, Pope Gregory the First. Yeah, Augustine of Canterbury and Pope Gregory the First had all the Anglos and Saxons converted to Christianity, and that goes back up to Roman conquest of Britain. Okay, Roman conquest Britain goes back to Julius Caesar. Okay, very important. All right, when you're dealing with um, the invasion, that deals with Claudius. Okay, that deals with Claudius. All right, so we're gonna talk about all that today. We're gonna let them talk about it. So those descendants of Adam and Eve. Okay, and we know Eden. It sounds like the word eating, and we know Eden was, or the landmass territory, geographic location outside of the castle, which was charted by King David of the Scottish King, goes back to Apparatus, okay, who was the father of Brutus Greenshield, okay? Very, very, very important, all right? So she's going to be talking about the T&O map, which we talked about in previous lectures. So you haven't heard about that, please go back and watch it, okay? Let's continue. They're talking about genealogy going all the way back to Adam and Eve in the 14th century. This is not based upon what the Bible said, but this is based upon those historians that did the research at that time. Okay. And these historians were members and chroniclers who created these illuminated manuscripts, which are not the only ones I'm talking about today, but they were also part of what we call the Benedictine monastery, okay, which was created by King Edward, our Jesus Christ, as a result of the conversion of Christianity of the Anglo-Saxon that happened the at the time when the tribes were amalgamated or broken up, all right, called a heptarchy, okay, very important. Matter of fact, let's just look at that real quick. Heptarchy. Heptarchy was a division of Anglo-Saxon England between the 6th and the 8th century into petty kingdoms, conventionally the 7 kingdoms of East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Mercia, Northumbria, Sussex, and Wessex. The term originated with the 12th century historian Henry of Huntingdon. Okay, so we're in the 13th century, okay, 12th century. All right. Huntingdon, and has been widely used ever since. But it has been questioned by historians as the number of kingdoms fluctuated, and that there was never a time when the territory of Anglo-Saxons was divided into 7 kingdoms, each ruled by one king. The period of the petty kingdom came to an end in the 8th century when England was divided into 4 dominant kingdoms: East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex. Okay? So when it was a heptarchy, that means all the tribes were divided. Okay, well we gonna go all the way back to Adam and Eve, up to the Trojan War, up to Brutus of Troy, then all the way up to what we call uh uh the Alfred the Great. All right, and we're gonna go all the way up to the from his descendants all the way up to King Edward the, for our Jesus Christ, then all the way up to what we call the Plantagenet crown under Edward the Fourth. Okay, let's look at it. So it is a genealogy. Okay, I didn't say that. She said that. It is a genealogy. Okay, very important. You're talking about doing genealogy tests. You better take it from here. Hear that? Even though it's biblical history, is not quoting the Bible. They're going based upon records of the people who lived at that time. Okay, Roger Matthew Paris, Roger what's his name, Weaver, something like that, Weaver. All right, these are people, the chroniclers, who wrote and created these illuminated scripts that you're reading right now. All right, so they're not using the Bible to justify their connection to those people in the Bible, going back to Adam and Eve. Okay, Very important you make that connection, distinction, rather. Okay. Other people who talk about biblical history. Who are these people? Okay. Now she think that's one name, Roger Window or Matthew of Paris. All right. That's two people actually. All right. Let's see who these people are. Roger Window. Now, the first lived in the 14th century. Okay. Roger Windover lived in the 13th century. It says Roger Windover, probably a native of Windover of Buckinghamshire, was an English chronicler of the 13th century. At an uncertain day, he became a monk at St. Albans Abbey, which is a Benedictine monastery abbey. Afterward, he was appointed prior of the cell of Belvoir, but he was forfeited this dignity in the early years of Henry III, King of England. Okay? Henry III, Henry of Westchester, King of England, Lord of Ireland, Duke of Aquitaine. Having been found guilty of wasting the endowment, his later years were passed to St. Albans, where he died on the 6th of May of 1266. Then we also have Matthew Paris. Matthew Paris. Matthew Paris, or Matthew the Parisian, was an English Benedictine monk, chronicler, artist, and illuminated manuscript, and cartographer who was based in St. Albans Abbey in Herefordshire. He authorized a number of historical works, many of which he scribed as illuminated himself, typically in a drawing partly colored with watercolor washes, sometimes called tinted drawings. Some were written in Latin, others in Anglo-Norman or French versions. He was sometimes confused with non-existent Matthew of Westminster, hence the word Westminster. Okay, very, very, very important. His chronicler, his Chronica Majora is a renowned medieval work, in many cases being a key source for mid-13th century Europe, partially due to the verbiage insertion of personal opinions into his narrative and use of sources such as records, letters, and conversations with witnesses to events including the English King Henry III, we just talked about him, King Richard of Cornwall. These are all, he was king of Rome and king of what was it? What was it? King of Rome and king of not just the English Rome, something else. All right, but Richard Cornwall, the Norwegian king Hakon IV, and a number of English bishops and many others. Okay, so we see that Matthew Paris and Roger Wendover, all these had a hand in the illuminated manuscript called the MS Scroll 1066, symbolic of William the Conqueror when he invaded England and brought on feudal law. Okay, very, very, very important. And it says that he was of the Benedictine. Okay, what is the Benedictine? Look at it. The English Benedictine congregation is the oldest of the 19 Benedictine congregations. Through the influence of Wilfrid Benedictine Biscop in Dunstan, the Benedictine rule spread rapidly in the north and was adopted in most of the monasteries that had been founded by the Celtic missionaries from Ionia. Many of the episcopal sees of England were founded and governed by Benedictines, and no fewer than 9 of old cathedrals were served by the black monks of priories attached to them. Monasteries served as a hospital and place of refuge for the weak and homeless. The monks studied the healing properties of plants and minerals to alleviate the sufferings of the sick. During the English Reformation, that was Henry VIII of the House of Tudors, bearing the white rose instead of the red rose. Okay? Yorks and Lancasters, Very important. During the English Reformation, all monasteries were dissolved and their land confiscated by the crown. You hear that? The crown. What crown we talking about? Let's go back to the Benedictine monastery that was reformed before Henry VIII reformed them again. It's called the English Benedictine Reformation, done by who? Our Jesus Christ, becoming the reincarnation of in his present day. The English Benedictine reform or monistic reform of the English church, not the Church of England, because the Church of England is a Roman Catholic church going back to Constantine the First, okay? Going back to the Council of Nicene, who wanted all the Anglo-Saxons to adopt their perspective of Christianity, not originating with those of the people who lived that life, but based upon the religion as established in what we call the Bible. And the MS Scroll is not an interpretation of the Bible. It's an interpretation of those people who wrote the chronological history in regard to the English Benedictine Reformation that was done by who? Jesus Christ. King Edgar, rich in spirit, which means rich in descendants, okay? Based upon his charter. Charter is an instrument used for incorporating, personifying, or what you call incarnating those what we call uh, 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 what we call prerogatives of a king. Okay, the prerogatives of a king. There you see Peter with the keys, Mary. You see the four flanked by angels, and him within that what we call majestic seat. Okay, very important. With the book closed. Okay, you don't get into the book don't open until you get into New Ministers Liberté, which means the book of life. Okay, you all heard about that. The book of life. Okay, the independent at that time is the book of life for all those who are registered in the book of life. That means those who are dead and those who are still alive. Okay. The independent reform of minus the reform of English church in the late 10th century was a religious and intellectual movement in later Anglo-Saxon period. In the mid-century, almost all monasteries were staffed by secular clergy who were often married. The reformers sought to replace them with celibate contemplative monks following the rule of who? Saint Benedict, the one who created the MS Code 1066. The movement was inspired by the continental monistic reform. So it was continental, brother, monistic reform. And the leading figures were Dunstan, Archbishop of Canterbury, not the one who converted us to Christianity, but the one who preserved our form of Christ-like uh, uh, worshiping, going back to King Edgar the People, which was in fact the incarnation of Christ in his day and time. Archbishop of Canterbury, afterward Bishop of Winchester, Oswald, and Archbishop of York. Okay, let's read it. In the 7th and 8th century, most monasteries were Benedictine, but in the 9th century, learning and monistic declined severely. Alfred the Great deplored the decline and started to reverse it. This is when he unified the barbarian kingdoms in 889, okay, against the Roman Catholic king or emperor Charlemagne. Going all the way back to Julius Caesar, going all the way back to Roman and Remus, okay? Very, very important. Alfred the Great deplored the decline, started to reverse it under the course of Ascertine, his great grandson, the first king of the whole of England, was a cosmopolitan. So he knew the world, okay? And future reformers such as Dustin Ethelwyn learned from continental exponents of the Benedictine monistic. The English movement became dominant under who? King Edgar in 959 to 975, okay? Who supported the expulsion of secular clergy from monasteries and cathedral chapters and their replacement by celibate monks. The reformer has close relations to what? The crown. Furthering its interest and depending on it for support, the movement was confined to southern England and Midland as the crown was not strong enough in northern England to confiscate property from local elites there to establish Benedictine foundations. The movement declined after the death of its leading exponents at the end of the 10th century. Okay? So it's very, 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 very important to understand what they had put in place based upon that, what we call the reform he did based upon a portrait of King Edgar in the charter of New Minister of Winchester. Okay, New Minister of Winchester, based upon what? New Minister's charter. What is New Minister's charter? Let's look at that real quick before I go back to the video. You have to know what you're talking about. New Minister Charter is an Anglo-Saxon illuminated manuscript that was likely composed by Bishop Ethelwald. It presented to the new ministers in Winchester by King Edgar in the year 966, okay, AD, Annus Dominius, to commemorate the Benedictine reform and is now part of the British Library collection. Okay, as you can see, flanked by the angels, there's St. Peter and there's Mary. This is symbolic of the Virgin Mary. Okay. Front piece of the New Minister Charter, Edgar is flanked by the Virgin Mary, St. Peter, and his offering the charter to Christ, the anointed, okay, Melchizedek, who sits enthroned above, surrounded by four angels. This is very, 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 very important. This goes into Christ's majesty. How many of you know about that? Okay. Christ's majesty. Christ's majesty, or Christ in his glory, which when he's in which he's actually seated on his throne. Okay. Christ in majesty of Christ in glory is a Western Christian image of Christ seated on a throne as the ruler of the world, carrying a crucifix globus. Okay. A T and O map. All right. A T and O map. Okay. Always seen frontally in the center of the composition and often flanked by other sacred figures whose members change over time and according to the context. Okay. Let's look at the pictures. Look at the illuminated manuscript, brothers and sisters. Four ends. Look at them. They're right there. The book is closed. Okay. The book is closed. This is what Halloween is all about. It's called Halloween or Hallows Eve, All Saints Day. Okay. All those who are died and all those who are living. It's based upon the the new minister's Liber Vitae. Okay. Very, very important. People like to show images, but not understand the images. And the book is open. That's him right there, King Edgar, right in back of me, who looks just like me. For Globus, right there. All these images. All right. Very important we understand these images of his Christ and his majesty. Okay. Very, 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 very important. All right. This is when we get here. New minister Liber Vitae. New Minister Liber Vitae is a confraternity book produced in Winchester. That's why it's called New Minister's Charter in Winchester, in southern England in 1031. It records the names and visitors of the new minister of Winchester and contains other information too, as well as the contemporary image of King Canute, a Danish king, I might add, and his second wife, Queen Emma of Normandy, a French queen. Okay, a French queen. Very, very important. The original manuscript is now kept in the British Library of London at Stowe MS 944 manuscript roll. And again, the Durban Liberté is often the only subscribing Anglo-Saxon confraternity book. On the folio, a later writer had added the names of who? King Edward the Confessor, Queen Edith, and Athelin Edgar. As a recent article, the Time license had argued this list shows that Edgar was considered as King Edward's legitimate heir before Edward's death. Okay, so that goes back right here to New Minister Charter. Right here. Okay. What this is, you see here, is a personification or incorporation or incarnation of King Edgar, his natural person, onto the office of the fiction of the king, which is now a legal fiction at law, applicable for its legal purposes. Just like a judge, just like an attorney, etc. Their tenure is based upon their legal capacity to act within that office. Okay, so as you can see, this is a trans jurisprudence, what we call a what they call it, legal, what do they call it? Legal reception or jurisprudential transplantation of a legal perception, where the immemorial custom and tradition is now applicable in law based upon legal memory, based upon the legal fiction, which creates a literal bridge between the literal text of the law, because the origin of the common law, which we follow, originated from King Henry II, the son of Godfrey the fifth kind of man, Jew, the ruler of Jerusalem, and King Edgar the Peaceful. It was the purpose to obtain why the stories were created in lieu of that story called Jesus. Okay, the Holy Sepulchre was started by Godfrey Bouillon, the son of Eustace II, who was married to Golda of England, who was married to Golda of England, who was the daughter of Ethelred the Unready, who was the father was Jesus Christ, King Edgar the Peaceful. Very important you understand what it is that I'm breaking down to you, because I am the reincarnation of that deity, okay, in the present day. All right. As you can see, offering the charter to Christ, okay, meaning that he was going to take on or take up the mantle of that Christ-like being on earth, since he was known as King Edgar the Peaceful. Okay, very important. King Edgar the Peaceful. Okay, that's why you got New Ministers, Book of Vete. As you can see here, the book is open. The book is open. Okay, the book is open. Look at it, brothers and sisters. Now Mary, and Peter are now at the bottom. Okay, they're both within their legal tenure. They were the incorporators. Okay, once they do their job, now the trustees take over. Okay, these are the bishops, things. Those are the councils. Okay, of Jesus. Okay, very, very, very important for you to understand that. All right, the book of life, Liber Vitae. That's what it means. Liber Vitae, book of life, which was what? Our confraternity book. What is the confraternity book? Let's look at it. A confraternity book, also called a Liber Memorialis book, which is a memorial book. Hence, time immemorial, legal memory. Time immemorial, legal memory. So time immemorial, memory of time immemorial is no longer needed, because we have legal memory to justify our immemorial memory based upon this book. Okay, the law. Okay, Newman's Liber Vitae, the book of life. Those who are a member of the English church, not the Church of England, but the English church, because the Church of England goes back to who? Augustine of Canterbury and Pope Gregory I, who converted everybody to Christianity, and then later on brought their calendar called the Gregorian calendar by Pope Gregory XV. 13th. All right, very important. Confraternity book, also called Liber Memorialis or Memorial Book or Liber Vitae, Book of Life, is a medieval register of the names of the people who had entered into a state, brothers and sisters, a state. We know what state means, a conscious state, a spiritual brotherhood, confraternity. So wherever you are, if you're on the same frequency, channel, wavelength, whatever name you choose to denote to your spirituality in lieu of the brotherhood, then it must be based upon this consciousness. Okay? Because no matter where you are on the same channel. Okay? The same frequency, God's channel, God's light, God's energy. Okay? Y'all better listen to it. And so it says, the Verite Book of Life is the medieval register of the names of the people who had entered into a state of spiritual brotherhood, confraternity with a church or monastery in some way, often by visiting it in the capacity of what? A pilgrimage. This is the purpose and intent for the Crusades. Okay? To Crusades. All right? Very, 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 very important. Persons named in such books were actively remembered in the prayers of the priests or monks. In many cases, these books were established at the 18th century and continue up to the 13th century. So-called the yearbooks are in many ways their successors. Okay, very, very, very important. So Roger Weaver, what's his name? Roger Wendover and Matthew Parrish are chroniclers that were associated with the Benedictine monasteries and what they call that were associated with black monks. Okay, black monks. Let's continue. Okay, Brutus Greenshell. Now we already know Brutus Greenshell was the son of Apparachus. Okay, who lived 10,000, lived in 10 10,000 BC. Okay, he lived in the BC era. Okay, well before Rome invaded, well before uh, the Trojans invasion. Okay, under Brutus of Troy. Okay, because you're going to mention both of them. Both of them are on this map. They both are on this map. Okay, now she said the Trojan War, but we didn't go into the Trojan War. Okay, we didn't go into the Trojan War. You know what I'm saying? So the Trojan War happened before, um, uh, if I'm not mistaken, this is look up Buddhist of Troy. All right, because she mentioned both of them. Buddhist of Troy. All right, Buddhist of Troy existed. Brian versions of the Historia Britannica makes Brutus the son of Ascanius, son of Silvius, and traces genealogy back to Ham, son of Noah. Another chapter treats Brutus' genealogy differently, making him the great grandson of legendary king Numa Pompilius, who was himself son of Ascanius, and tracing his descent from Noah's son Japheth. The Christianity traditions conflict with classical Trojan genealogy, relating to Trojan's royal family to the Greek gods. Okay, so Brutus of Troy, which is mentioned on that illuminated manuscript. Okay, we in spite of what year he lived in, okay, which we know he had to live in BC because he's mentioned before Brutus Green Shell, who was the son of Apparachus. Okay, very important. But look at the face of the depiction they give him, which is dishonorable. All right, because if you look at his successor, okay, is Locrinus. All right there. All right. Locrinus was a legendary king of Britain and recounted in the 12th century chronicles of Godfrey Monmouth, his Historia Regum Britannia. He came to power in 1125 BC. Okay? 1125 BC. Locrinus from the genealogical chronicle of the kings of England to Edward IV. Do y'all hear what I'm telling y'all? Do y'all hear what I'm telling y'all? Y'all must not hear what I'm telling y'all. Who was his other son? Camber. Let's look at his son Camber. Camber. Also, Camber was the legendary first king of Cambria, going to Godfrey of Monmouth. Okay. Also in the genealogical chronicle Kings of England. All right. Very, 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 very important. All right. Got an armor bearer. Who else? Abaracus. I mean, Albanactus. Albanactus. According to the Garfield Mamas, was the founding of the king of Albania or Albany. He is in effect, Garfield's eponym for Scotland. You hear that? In effect, Garfield's eponym for Scotland. His territory was the north of the Humber Estuary. This myth was then taken up by Geraldus Cambrius. Okay? Albania, Albany, it's Scotland, y'all. It's Scotland. You see what I'm revealing to y'all? You see what I'm revealing to you. This is where the word Alba comes from. Okay? When originally it was called Albion, the land of the giants. Okay? Very, 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 very important to understand what's being said to you. Okay? Let's go back to the video. So this is before Rome invasion. So this is before Rome entered the pictures. Okay. This is before the Saxons entered the picture. Okay. Very, very important. BC, y'all. We're in BC. You heard it. She said Britain being pre-Roman. Okay, pre-Roman. You don't have the what we call the Great Conspiracy or the Barbarian Conspiracy or the barbarian migration into Eastern and Western Europe until after Rome fall. Okay, this is pre-Rome. One more thing. As you look to my right, well, you look on the screen to the right, you see the middle line of the kings of Britain or the kings of England, and you see on the other side a gold line. This starts the genealogy of the Roman kings. All right, but the Roman king, Roman really don't come until 753. They go back and cover BC times. Okay, Rome is not a part. So these are two realities existing at the same time under different calendars. Okay, under different calendars. The Gregorian calendar is not even existing right now. Okay, right now you're going by the Julian calendar, was created in 46 BC. Okay, but they're going to take you back to Romulus and Aurelius in 753 BC, and at that time we're well into the 26th dynasty of what we call the Berbers. Okay, on the Shishak. All right, come on, brothers and sisters, put your heads on. Ain't lying. He says something's happening here in yellow. Okay. So now a different timeline, a different calendar has sprung up. They don't even know. Okay. So if based upon the MS scroll that you're looking at in the membrane attachment to the scroll, MS scroll, okay, they're giving you a timeline uh, 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 from the Trojan War, all right, to Brutus Green Shell, the son of Apparachus, which automatically takes you to Britain, all right, because we know Albany, Albi is called Scotland, okay, where these British or Britain or Berber kings lived. Okay, it's very, very important. All of a sudden now, you got two timelines existing. This goes back to Roman now. It ain't pre-Roman now. It's Rome. Now it's Rome and post-Rome. It's about to take place now. And from Rome, you're going to get into what we call the Frankish dynasty because it's going to bear from the middle again when Alfred the Great unified through the kings of Wessex from the Heptarchy to what we call William the Conqueror. Okay, watch it. So we're going to go from BC to AD. We went from BC to AD, all from this one illuminated manuscript. Viking, Jackson, Frankish North, whether they're Frankish or they were Vikings. That okay, we got two timelines existing: the Berbers timeline and the Roman calendar timeline. The Hebrews they ain't even talking about that because this is not based upon the Hebrew Bible and that story. This is the only person you see being argued here is pre-Roman, Roman, and post-Roman. Okay, that's all you hear. And the ones who exist before pre Roman and post Roman are who? Us, the English kings. Okay, very, 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 very important. So they don't even know. Now, once again, we know he was the son of Apparachus. Okay, he was the son of Apparachus. Very, very, very important. All right. Now you're going to go into uh, 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 Julius Caesar. Okay, and what's the other character they're going to Lucius. And Lucius was one who introduced Christianity in Britain. Okay, consider. You see that BC AD line or the BCCE line. Okay, very, very, very important. At that time, King Edgar is living under the Berber calendar. They're not going by the calendar. They're using the Julius Caesar calendar, which is a correlative calendar running parallel to the calendar that exists for these people we're talking about as Berber, identified as ancient Britons. Okay, very important. Hmm. Yep. Who invaded Britain? Scimitar. Lucius. Let's look at that real quick. Lucius of Britain, king of the Britons, traditionally credited with introducing Christianity into Britain. Right there, brothers and sisters. Okay, right there. All right, here we go. Lucius. Okay, so Lucius was holding a church. Okay, and she said it showed with the force of affiliation with the church. Okay, going back to Lucius. Okay, all right, before the unification of Alfred the Great through what we call the Heptarchy, when they became the kings of Wessex, and then through the Independent Monastery, the Reformation took place from the conversion of Christianity under the Roman Catholic tradition. Okay, very important to understand. That goes back to what we talked about yesterday. That goes back to what we call the Roman Civil War. That goes back to the Roman Civil War. Constantine. Let's just look at it. I talked about that yesterday. Roman Civil War. That brought on the uh, migration period and the Great Conspiracy. Okay. Roman Civil War was fought between Roman emperors Constantius II and usurper Magnentius. Okay. They all were subject to the Emperor Constantine, who founded the Council of Nicaea. Okay. Very, very important. This brought on the downfall of Rome in 410, which led to what we call the Great Conspiracy. And the Great Conspiracy was the barbarian conspiracy. We talked about this yesterday, so watch yesterday's lesson, part one, and then clear it up. The Great Conspiracy was a year-long um, state of war and disorder that occurred near the end of the Roman rule in Britain. Fourth century Roman history, Ammonius and Marcellius described it as a barbarian conspiracy, okay, which took advantage of depleted military forces in the provinces, and many soldiers had marched with Magnentius in his unsuccessful bid to become emperor of Rome. It's also led to what we call the migration period and the crossing of the Rhine, okay? The migration period 300 to 600 AD, also known as the Barbarian Invasion, was a period of European history marked by large-scale migration that saw the fall of Western Roman Empire and subsequent settlement of the former territory by various tribes and the establishment of post-Roman kingdoms there. This was a result of crossing the Rhine. Okay, crossing the Rhine. Crossing the Rhine by a mixed group of barbarians, which included Vandals, Alans, and Suebi, and traditionally considered to have occurred on the 31st of December 406. Okay? Very, very important to understand your history. Going back to the video in closing. This is the Heptarchy becoming one kingdom from 7 to 5, uh, uh, all the way down to 1, known as the Kings of Wessex. This is the unification of the Berber kingdoms from those were known as barbarian kingdoms. Hmm. Nativity scene. Okay. Nativity scene. Let me start right there. So this is when the concept of the church comes in. Okay. This is where the concept of the church comes in. This is why when we get to the conversion of the Anglo-Saxon under Pope Gregory the First and Auckland of Canterbury, Alfred the Great had to unify those kingdoms as a result of what took place through Rome, the fall of Rome, as well as um, the Frankish conflict that they had. Okay, he had to unify them and create a jurisprudential reception of common law, which originally King Alfred was the founder of the common law, and then it spread to the Plantagenet crown under Godfrey's son, Godfrey's son Henry II. Okay, very important. But this just shows you how when you get to the concept of the nativity symbol and the church, and we see that Lucius was the first Britain king to introduce the church into Britain, alone preceded by the conversion of Christianity from the Roman Catholic Church. This is where the English church comes into play. Okay, the English church, not the Church of England, but the English Church of England, now called the Third Temple Church of England, heirs and successors. Okay? That, bro, that parchment, brothers and sisters, how come I know this story so perfect? And they don't even know it. You who writes your books, set your timeline. This is our timeline being explained to you. You connect the timeline, then you are considered part of that time. Confraternity. Okay? Not physical connection, but a mental connection. Brain eight. This is Alfred the Great's work. Okay, what it said, what y'all call it, King's Alpha Plan, Rex 84. Here it is for you right here. Heptarchy. History's on fire. You see that torch right there, King Edgar carrying that torch of fire. Witten, Wittenmont. Now this is the now once again, this is the English Benedictine monastery we're talking about now. This is the English Benedictine Reformation that's being explained in the scroll right here. I better listen. The English Benedictine Reform of Monastic Reform of the English Church. Why do you think we call ourselves the English Church? The third temple, the last temple, was supposed to be rebuilt, called the English Church of England. The third temple, English Church of England. Okay, which was goes back to those constituent corporate bodies under the same corporate authority, under the same corporate powers that create a legal continuity, a perpetual existence of our existence as English people. Okay? Very, 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 very important. That created God's church. Okay? God's church. Only one church, God's church. A church that's not made by walls. Okay? So you don't have to go to a building to be a member of this church. The only way you can be a member is conscious affiliation with this church. Because anything the mind do, what? The body will follow. Okay? Very, very important. To my closing. Like, share, subscribe. If you want me to come on your podcast, please holler. Leave a comment in the box. And as long as you have some decor, I will definitely come and break bread and share this good news with you. Right? Let's come to our closing. France. Okay. Now you got kings of France coming in the picture. That goes into William the Conqueror. Different timeline. That and come out Jesus Christ. They don't know it though. And they're gonna mention Edgar. Edmund is the father of King Edgar. That's father of Jesus Christ. Edmund the First, brothers and sisters. They're gonna skip right over it because it's not for them to know it. Even the conquer. Yeah, right. You know they look like that. What you mean? Probably not. They dark skinned. You heard that, y'all? They are upset with me. And with the third, they got laws right here in New Jersey. War of the Roses. the fourth. Okay. All right. So that's the Plantagenet crown. Okay. The Plantagenet crown going through what they said the War of the Roses. Edward the Fourth was the last king of the kings of England under the authority of the Plantagenet crown. Okay. Now I'll close out on this. War of the Roses is known as the Civil War, or also called the Cousin War. So we are cousins arguing about who want to be in the position, and no one wants the position as a result of the responsibility. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Okay? The conflict was a fault between the supporters of the House of Lancaster, emblem with the red rose, and the House of York, which was the white rose, to rival cadet branches of who? The House of Plantagenet. Who was the House of Plantagenet? Let's look at it. The House of Plantagenet was a royal house which originated in French county of Anjou. The name Plantagenet is used by modern historians to identify four distinct royal houses, the Angevins, who were also counts of Anjou. The main line of Plantagenet following the loss of Anjou, and the House of Lancaster, York, which were two cadet branches. The family held English throne from 1154 with the ascension of Henry II and until 1485 when Richard III died in battle. Okay? Very, 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 very important. Edward III was the son of Edward II. Edward II was the son of Edward I. And Edward I passed laws to protect our state at the last crusade, which was called Queen Imperators, right here. And that is right here in New Jersey by statute 46.3-5. Queen Imperators, a statute passed by Parliament of England in 1290 during the reign of Edward I. Okay? Edward I took place in the last Crusade War. Okay? It was the Ninth Crusade. 1275 ended. In 1285, he passed De Donuts Conditional Bus. All right? Which was passed before Queen Imperators. All right? To protect Intel estates, which is a state that belongs to you, the descendants of God's children. Okay? Very, very, very important. It says Quint Imperatoris, post Quint Imperatoris led land management practices and direct sales of land, as though it's thought by historians such as Charles Plummer that this then developed into one of the possible underlying causes of what? The War of the Roses. Okay? The War of the Roses. Who would inherit the intel estate of the descendants of the kings and queens of England? All right, very important. And this will be established by the Adonis Conditional Bus, which we'll go to right now, revised statute. And I'll close on that. That statute that we just Parliament, 1290 statute is right here. You see this? A statute passed in 1290 is right here. Alienation Freehold Statute, Queen Impetus Terranum, His Majesty's law on purchasing property, meaning that you have the right to use it by way of what we call a non-possessory right by way of easement, which is the use and property that you don't own. Why? Because the person who own it is based upon 46.3-15. They donuts condition the bus, which is right here. It states entail. Passed by who? Edward the First. Alive and well, brothers and sisters. Alive and well. Okay? So the fact that these laws are alive and well, a bridge needs to be created, okay, to bring that law or that silent law alive and make it applicable in the present without breaching the letter of the law. Okay? This is why we must understand land tenure in England in order to understand if we have a right to an inheritance. Okay? We have to understand this, brothers and sisters. Having this one more thing, and then I'll close out. Ancestors know who you are consciously. Consciousness is a mental faculty. It had nothing to do with the physical. Last thing I'm gonna look up. Land tenure in England. Even before the Norman conquest, there was a strong tradition of landholding in Anglo and Saxon law. We understand that Saxon law was called the Ding and Anglo-Saxon was called Witten. When they unified, it became the common law. When William the Conqueror took over in 1066, we went from Berber kings to English kings, now misnombered as Anglo-Saxons. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We see in the calendar in 1065, there was no English reading our year. When 1066 came with William the Conqueror, there was an English reading our year. So therefore, we must not throw the baby out with the bathwater. When William the Conqueror, a Frankish Roman Catholic king asserted sovereignty over England, he confiscated the property of the recalcitrant English landowners, meaning those who refused then and those who won't refuse to the present day. Over the next dozen years, or 1,000 years, or 100 years, he granted land to his lords and the dispossessed Englishmen, that means you, brothers and sisters, or affirmed their existing land holdings in exchange for fealty and promises of military and other services. At the time of the Doomsday Book, meaning the Day of Judgment, that's also called Anglo-Saxon law, law of judgment, all land in England was held by someone, and from that time there has been no allodial land in England. So that means that when William the Conqueror had it, there was no allodial land. When William the Conqueror gave it back to us, the land would remain allodial because it would be under what we call folk right. So in order to legitimize the folk right inheritance that was preserved from time immemorial and lieu of how English possessed it under tenure and non-feudal, the only way that can be returned by reversion from Mandarin, which is in order to legitimize the notion of the crown's paramount lordship, a legal fiction that all land titles were held by the king's subject as a royal grant was adopted. Legal fiction are something that's false but accepted as real for the purpose of for the legal purposes. Okay, very, 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 very important for you to understand why we incorporated in law as the third Temple English Church of England. Okay. And with that, understanding time immemorial is very important. Okay. Understand time out of mind, time before record, memory, or custom. All right. In order to have some legitimacy in the present in lieu of law, that immemorial understanding must become legal in the present understandings of the minds of the people. Okay? So time immemorial is a phrase meaning time extended beyond reach, a memory, record, or tradition, and definitely ancient. Anything ancient beyond memory or record. The phrase is used in legally significant context as well as in common parlance. So you don't want to be just talking in common parlance. You want to have some legal understanding. So it says in law, time immemorial denotes a period of time beyond which legal memory cannot go, and time out of mind. Most frequently, the phrase time immemorial appears as a legal term of art and judicial discussion of common law developed in the United States, the property rights concerning Native Americans. So the common law regards time immemorial in regards to who it relates to those over here as Native Americans, okay? That's why they called you Native American and not English, because they know if you took the English, you could connect back to your ancestors because of what I just told you. Because in English American common law, time immemorial is frequently used to describe time required for a custom to mature into a common law. This is jurisprudential reception or legal reception. Medieval Richard Barber describes this as a watershed between a primary oral culture and a world where writing was paramount. Common law body of law identified by judges and judicial proceedings rather than created by a legislator, hence jurisprudential reception, rather by, pardon, sorry, rather by legislator. Judges determine the common law by pinpointing the legal principles consistent with reiterating the previous legal cases over a long period of time. In English law, time immemorial ends and legal memory begins at 1189 at the end of the reign of King Henry II, who is associated with the invention of the English common law. Okay? English common law. With that, I think I said enough. I do not come to destroy, but I come to fix. I don't come to rewrite, but I come to make clear of a story that we have all forgotten as a result of our status. But now is the time for all of you to unify under your king. Whatever your tribe you come from, you now have a king. And his name is King Clifford Jefferson, descendant of God, the fifth kind of man Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. With that, I greeted you as I always meted you in peace and love. Peace.